The following series of videos are created by Jessica Ross and Margarita Munoz.
We are trying to create awareness about disability justice, especially in a world like today. It is so important for us to speak up for those whose voices may not be heard.
Individuals with disabilities have faced stereotypes and discrimination for too long. It's up to us as a community to raise awareness and be advocates in the fight for disability justice.
So, what is disability justice? Disability justice is a topic which relates to disabled individuals not being treated to the fullest potential which they deserve. Oftentimes, disability justice can also be confused with disability rights and disability inclusion. Disability justice connects with all other key movements for justice and liberation from oppression. It is about making sure that disabled people have equal justices, just like anyone else.
When it comes to the Disability Justice Framework, which was created by Patty Burns, there are 10 principles that embody it. The first one is intersectionality. As quoted by Audre Lorde, we do not live single-issue lives. Each and every person has multiple communities in which they identify. Those identities can be a site of oppressions which they face. The second principle is leadership of those most impacted, which reflects our understanding of ableism in the context of other historical systemic oppressions. As quoted by Aurora Levins Morales, we are led by those who most know these systems. The third principle is anti-capitalist politic. Referring to our economy, it unfortunately sees humans as components of profit. But by nature, we all tend to be anti-capitalist and non-conforming. The fourth principle is commitment to cross-movement organizing. This principle works in shifting how disability is understood from a social justice standpoint. It contextualizes ableism and it leans on political alliances. The fifth principle is recognizing wholeness. Recognizing wholeness encompasses valuing people for who they are, as they are, and that also means that people have worth outside of capitalist notions of productivity.
The sixth principle is sustainability. This means that by pacing ourselves, individually and collectively, we allow ourselves to be sustained long-term. And because of our embodied experiences, we can use that as a guide and reference, pointing us to justice and liberation. The seventh principle is commitment to cross-disability solidarity. This principle deals with the honor, the insights, and participation of all of our community members. And we know that isolation undermines collective liberation. The eighth principle is interdependence. This one encompasses that we meet each other's needs as we build toward liberation, without always reaching for state solutions that inevitably extend control over our lives. The ninth principle is collective access. This principle deals with community and representation amongst one another. As minority, brown, black, and members of LGBTQ disabled individuals, bring an elevated community together that goes beyond able-bodied and able-minded normativity. The 10th and last principle is collective liberation. This principle means that nobody, no mind, no body can be left behind. We are all in this together, and that only by working together we can accomplish true justice and true equality for all. There are 7,090,000 adults in California alone today who have a disability. And in the entire United States, there are 61 million adults living with a disability. This ends up being approximately 1 in 4 adults in the entire United States that have a disability. So the topic of disability justice really affects a huge number of people in our society, and it's extremely important that we help and maintain advocacy in this topic. Individuals with disabilities are more likely to be impacted socially. They are more likely to be unemployed, and they are more likely to be a victim in a violent crime. Health-wise, disabled individuals are more likely to die from cardiovascular disease. They are more likely to be obese. They are more likely to smoke cigarettes, and they are less likely to engage in physical activity. When it comes to accessibility, they are less likely to receive medical attention due to cost, as well as nearly 70% of all disabled women do not even have a current mammogram.
In the entire world, over 1 billion people live with a disability of some kind. Disability affects vulnerable populations more than any other. Because of this, people with disabilities often do not receive the health care that they need. Disabilities affect schooling and education. Children with disabilities are less likely to attend school. They are also more likely to live in poverty. Hope is not lost. With attention to this issue of disability justice, people with disabilities can live a maximized life. People with disabilities are just as capable of living and participating in the community. The barriers which unnecessarily affect individuals with disabilities need to be overcome, and we need to advocate for them.
There have been many efforts to help minimize the statistics which affect disabled people today. One such effort was the establishment of the ADA, also known as the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was put in place to help people with disabilities in order to support the civil rights of disabled individuals. The first version of this bill was introduced in 1988, and it almost wasn't passed because Congress was afraid of what type of financial implications and expenses it would have on employers at the time. Luckily, activists in support of the ADA and in support of disability rights and justices protested in response to the ADA. These activists supported the ADA. They used public demonstrations and protests, much like the very famous 504 sit-in. These activists demanded accountability from the government. They used public demonstrations to make their voices heard. If it wasn't for these individuals, the ADA would not have been passed, and we still wouldn't have an ADA today. This is a true reminder of your voice and how powerful you are. Your voice, your actions, and your choices really can make a difference.
Congress later passed the ADAA to counter some Supreme Court decisions that were believed to have limited the scope of the ADA and narrowed the definition of disability beyond the original congressional intent. Once the ADAA was passed, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission updated its regulations regarding disabilities. Now, the definition of disability under the law is meant to be as broad as possible. Although the ADA has been a huge step forward in the fight for disability justice, there are still many holes in the ADA which are not accounted for. The ADA does not cover private places such as homes. Places such as religious buildings do not have to follow ADA guidelines for accessibility. Buildings in general, which were built before the ADA was passed, do not have to comply with the ADA's structural guidelines. ADAs also do not cover illegal substance abuse. They only recognize legal substance abuse, such as alcoholism. A huge thing people who are disabled need to worry about are doctors who literally refuse to give them organ transplants just because they feel that individuals without disabilities deserve the organs more than an individual with disabilities. If one of us is not free, then none of us are free. Minority individuals with disabilities are often forgotten about and can face some of the most difficult and often dangerous hardships due to their disability. Individuals with disabilities make up a third to half of all people killed by law enforcement officers, according to a report by the Rudderman Family Foundation analyzing data from 2013 to 2015.
From the doctors that are supposed to save them to the police that are supposed to protect them, Black people have to face deeply ingrained racism, the consequences of which can sometimes be fatal. Because minority disabled people are at such a higher risk for injustices and even death, it is particularly important that we are advocates for them and we work for disability justice for them so that we can all have a safer society for everyone.
What can you do to make a change? The first and most important thing you can do in your life to make a difference in disability justice would be to spread awareness and participate in demonstrations and protests. If there's anything we have learned from the demonstrators which protested in support of the ADA and the 504 sit-ins, it's that you and your voice really matter. Another great thing you can do in your life to help with disability justice is avoid using ableist terminology. For example, you can say wheelchair user instead of wheelchair bound. This is a new, more preferred practice of using identity-first language. For example, instead of saying disabled person, you would say a person with disabilities. That way, you are identifying the person first rather than their disability. Another thing parents and teachers can also do is start teaching children about inclusivity and acceptance. Children are more susceptible to learning while they're young, rather than when they get older. To teach them about compassion and differences is amazing and a wonderful step in creating a better future for disability justice. You can also take time to research and spread the word on your own. Social media is a powerful tool in getting messages across to new people.
You can always donate and reach out to charities and nonprofits who work as advocates in disability justice. Some nonprofits and charities you can refer to are Respectability, Friendship Circle, and Active Minds. These are just a few of the many nonprofits and charities that help push disability justice forward. We encourage you to do your own research and find more nonprofits and charities which might interest and inspire you in the fight for disability justice. If you can, volunteering at organizations such as Respectability is an amazing way you can help further the reach of disability justice in your local area. And finally, if you are part of a school or institution, you should check out the Disability Department on campus. At Cal State LA, we have an office for students with disabilities, which does its best to make sure that all students on campus are getting an equal opportunity of education as anyone else. We hope that you have learned a lot about disability justice and that you feel inspired and confident that you can do something to help further this cause.